Hi, I'm Joan Newcomb, and today's morning musings is about life after death. I'm doing a series of these morning musings, and I'm using my blog, Adventures in Density and Effort, as my inspiration. Now, these articles are from 2008, and I'm going to be reading these blog posts, but I will stop and comment or especially comment at the end if there's anything that I need to add. And the world has changed a lot since then. So, life after death. I'm a trained clairvoyant, and I've been doing spiritual work professionally since 1981. I've communicated with people's lost loved ones, observed when my grandmother passed in 1994, and assisted with pets' transitions. So I'm going to say here that I realized that even though I posted this in 2008, it was actually from a blog post that I wrote back in 2004. So I've had a couple more experiences with helping people pass since this was written. Even so, when my first love died in November of 2004, I went through a grieving like any unaware person, but at the same time, I gained tremendous knowledge about the reality of life and death. This person was on his bicycle crossing a busy street when he was hit by a silver PT Cruiser. And I was 3,000 miles away in a different country, but had the sudden urge to contact him, which I didn't follow through on, being in the midst of a busy workday. But later that evening, sitting alone, I felt a presence come towards me, and it unnerved me so much that I slept with the lights on for the next 3 days. I later discovered that he'd been hit in the afternoon, but had passed in the hospital without regaining consciousness. Also, he had no ID on him, so no relatives were informed for several days. Throughout the weekend and into the next week, I had all these thoughts go through my head. How life goes by in the blink of an eye, reflections on choices I'd made in my life. And this person had been my first love, and we'd continued writing until I was 23 and stopped when I met my first husband. And this first boyfriend and I had only been reconnected through the gift of the internet for a couple of months. And I'd been suppressing the urge to jump on a plane and visit. I felt it was too early in getting to know each other. And the next Saturday, I received an email sent by his brother informing his address list that he died. So now it was too late. And my initial reaction was one of detachment and mild surprise, but as the day went on, I became overwhelmed with grief. I started having all sorts of physical symptoms. I began using my left hand for everything, including picking up glasses of water to drink, which can be potentially hazardous when you're right-handed. And I started driving my car sitting upright and hunched over my steering wheel. I started wearing my reading glasses everywhere, also potentially hazardous when you're farsighted. And I have to say, this was, 2003, and now I do wear glasses all the time. So my first boyfriend was left-handed, was tall, long torsoed, so he would hunch over uh, his when he was driving, and he was also myopic, so he needed glasses. And I got the impression that I was supposed to be at the memorial in order to communicate for him. I got the impression that when you're dead, things look different because you see energy rather than physical form. I actually recall having this experience when I was consciously aware of communicating with him because he wasn't seeing things in the same way because, yeah, when you pass, everything is energy. So really, it was when I decided that I was going to fly to the memorial that I was overwhelmed with grief. And the only time my grieving subsided during the early weeks was one time that I sat and meditated and went back to the moment of his accident and sent a healing for his passage, similar to a Reiki technique. And on the day of the memorial, I had lunch with a mutual friend of ours who had not seen in 30 years. I hadn't been back to this city in 25. And I asked him why my first boyfriend had never married. And indeed, his life seemed identical to the way it was when I knew him. He was living alone with a dog. And the only difference was he had recently retired and had just, when back then he had just begun his career. And our friend said that to his knowledge, he'd never dated after me. And this was confirmed at a gathering of friends and family after the memorial as well. And there I was able to talk to specific people that he'd mentioned in recent emails with me and pass on the things that he'd said about them. On the plane home, my emotions hit full force. Didn't want to live in a world without him. I felt like every choice I'd made since I was 23 had been a mistake. The grieving felt like a never-ending bottomless pit. It seemed like there was no light at the end of the tunnel, and at the same time, I was constantly experiencing his presence. And at night, I would feel like I was embraced by him. I communicated to him constantly and felt like he was easier to talk to now when that it was in the non-physical, but harder to hear, kind of like a bad cell phone connection. I asked if our communications were real, and if so, could he manifest something for me for Valentine's Day? Well, February 14th came and went, and I was bummed. And then the next morning, as I was letting my dogs out, I had discovered a little plastic necklace with red hearts hanging on my doorknob. It turned out that a friend who had delivered firewood to me the day before had felt compelled to leave this necklace for me. I figured that as a newly dead person, he would have had to go through someone alive in order to manifest something. I laughed and I thought I could hardly wait for my birthday in April. Well, my birthday came and went, and again I was bummed. It was in the midst of a 3-day class in another city that I was assisting. And the next morning, one of the participants came up to me and told me that something I had said the day before had touched them. I had talked about a visualization technique for non-resistance called body of glass, where you imagine yourself as transparent so negative energy passes right through you. Well, it turns out he was an amateur glass blower and had felt compelled to give me something from his collection and handed me this glass paperweight. Just like Valentine's Day, my deceased friend delivered a gift a day late and through someone unexpected. This paperweight was amazing. It was clear glass with a blue glob in the center and a small air bubble. And then I realized if you were non-physical, viewing people as energy, you would see them like this, like the dense physical body is a darker color surrounded by a clear aura. And I figured the air bubble was my friend hanging out in my space. Besides these gifts, I also received a package in the mail, and his friends and brother had been going through his house, found a box with all my old letters and journals from that time. And if I had never reconnected with him, if I'd never gone back to that funeral, I would never have gotten these things back. One of the things that helped me continue remembering is that this lifetime passes in the blink of an eye. I believe it's as spirit, there is no time or space. So everything that is happening all at once to consciousness, including all of our past and future lifetimes. So as spirit, I'm already connected with him. And I believe that this world is my creation through my own thoughts and actions. And this belief helped pull me out of my darkest moments when I couldn't imagine going on. The world of spirit seems to be one of ecstasy, all joy and no pain. I mean, why on earth would I want to stay in this realm of density and effort? Then I thought that if I did leave now, I realized I would have wasted this lifetime's opportunities to create my physical reality any way that I want. I began to consciously choose my thoughts. When sad or negative ones came up, I would choose better feeling ones. And I started to focus on what kind of experience I would like to have in this lifetime. And doing this slowly pulled me out of grief and depression and into an emotionally stronger space than I'd been in for years. After about 9 months, I noticed that my friend's energy became more diffuse. I think he'd mostly finished with his cycles and with those of us in the physical realm. And I wonder if there's a gestational period, just like 9 months it takes for our bodies to form and us to come into the physical, whether there's a sort of a 9 month cycle for us to check out. Although I think sometimes people who die slowly, like with an illness, might do this while they're still physically with their form. Even though my friend's personality level energy is dissipated as the months go by, they still communicate with me in other ways. I still see silver PT cruisers at odd times. Sometimes 2 and 3 in a row will pass me by on an otherwise deserted street. And at first, this used to creep me out and always produce a new round of mourning. But now I feel comforted, a symbolic reminder that they still exist in the non-physical. And I'll have to say that this still happens, and these particular cars are kind of out of date now. So when I pull up to a grocery store and the only parking space is next to a silver PT Cruiser, Or I find myself having to make a detour down a road that I hadn't intended to turn, and there's a silver PT Cruiser parked in a driveway. Those really feel like significant reminders that non-physical aspect of life. Looking back at it all, I can see that my grieving was a natural and necessary process for my body. Physical bodies take life and death very seriously. This is the only lifetime that physical bodies are going to have, and they're not going to make it out of this lifetime alive. But as immortal spirit, or as I'd say now, consciousness, we have more neutrality about the process. Your body is your physical vehicle. Just like the owner of a car, you'll have many cars in your lifetime. You might get attached to the one you're driving, but when it's time to trade it in, you'll go on to have another one, which you'll enjoy thoroughly as well. My body's reaction to my friend's death with fear and sadness. But as spirit, there was also curiosity and joyful communication. And I'll mention there is that since writing this in 2004, I've come to realize that as consciousness, all these lifetimes are happening at once. Really, there isn't a linear process of past lives to future lives because they are all happening at once. One thing I profoundly learned is that what remains after this lifetime is love. The love that I felt, especially during the darkest times, was the essence we all seek from our relationships. It's what we feel and experience for each other beyond the personality quirks and conflicts. It's reinforced for me what's truly important in this life, and that it's love. So a few other things to add to this, because I had the opportunity to go help my mother when she had Alzheimer's and cancer, and to help midwife her back to spirit. And my experience with that was observing the disease of Alzheimer's as a way that the being was already somewhat disconnected from the body and in the non-physical and moving back and forth inside and outside of time. In fact, I sensed my mother's personality, not just herself as consciousness, but her personality 4 years after she passed. And I thought, wow, she was really moving back and forth in time. And my experience with helping midwife her back to spirit is that the body was in the process of dismantling and breaking down as the being had already left. And then my father actually died a year after my mother, 11 months after my mother, actually. And I was there helping in a more abbreviated way as a doula for his process back to spirit, because he did not have Alzheimer's. He was fully conscious. He had a lot of things he was worried about with his passage, and a lot of that was religious based, I think. And some other parts might have to do with his actual lifetime. And it's really just people passing from the storyline to the non-physical. We are all connected. We are all connected with everyone we love. And even if it's someone we don't love, the experience on the other side is one of infinite love. And the fun thing about that is that we can actually experience this infinite love in the physical as well. It's just a process of being aware of ourselves as consciousness and bringing in more consciousness, which is all part of this consciousness evolution that we're going through. And I think that's for another morning musings. So if you've had any experiences with people passing, please leave a comment, because I love to read your comments about this. And if you like these videos, please like them and share them with others. You can also subscribe. And if you want to know more, my website is joan-newcomb.com. I do individual sessions. I have a coaching program. And if you're watching this on YouTube, all those links are below. And I'll see you next time for another Morning Musings.